We launch a Willy Wonka experience in Glasgow. Not really. Omega release the White Speedy at long last, and I have a tremendously bad experience and good experience at Geneva. All this and more on the show today. Welcome to the Scottish Watches podcast. Remember to play along at home if you want to see all the pictures, tech spec, technical details, all that jazz. We have got a thing called show notes. The link will be in the description. But we are doing a very quick edit because we are heading off down south. We have got British Watchmakers Day merely hours away. Well, actually, merely hours away from the moment that you listened or watched this show, because we record ahead of time, we edit ahead of time, but we're packing all our stuff up because we've got so many brands, so many watches, and so many people, including listeners and viewers to the show, to meet and greet down south. But Dave is with me. He is here in Scotland, not in England, not in Switzerland. What is happening in the world of Dave?
Dave is spending his last forlorn day in Scotland for a little while as he heads south tomorrow. Then he heads to Switzerland and then back from Switzerland, back to England though, and then on to the British Watchmakers Day, which is an exciting event coming up for sure. Long in the planning and long in the waiting for many people, where the good and great of British watchmaking, from the very top of the pile to the other good guys as well. See, I could have said the bottom of the pile, but there's no such thing as the bottom of the pile when it comes to British watchmaking.
No, Hampton aren't in existence anymore. Ross has kind of thrown the towel in.
Wow, I mean, yep, we can go there. I mean, they don't exist, so we can definitely go there. So the great and good of the British watchmaking sphere will be in attendance there, and many a special watch will be up for grabs, as well as many of the brands have decided to make very limited edition, and not the Omega limited edition of...
Yeah, Dave, there's no point telling everybody about this, because anybody that cares would have listened to us before, bought tickets, and would be going. So let's not beat this dead horse, because if they don't have tickets, they can't go. There's no point hyping it up. But what we can hype up is something Dave has been hyping up for a number of days stroke weeks, and that is a watch that's something to do with Daniel Craig, perhaps something to do with an announcement that never really happened, and then there's been a little bit of a trickle on Instagram, and the folks at Swatch Group and Omega have finally decided to let the cat out of the bag.
At the back end of last year, there was a picture that made its way round the press outlets of watch lore, and it showed Daniel Craig wearing a white dialed Speedmaster, and folk were questioning, what is this, they say. Was it the platinum cased one? Was it precious metal? Was it white gold? What was this? No one could quite put their finger on it, and to be fair, it was a bit of a blurry picture, but what you could definitely make out was the dial was white and there was a wee touch of red in there as well. Well, everything is now out, and as you're listening to this, the news will have hit the streams as it is being officially launched the day before you're now listening to this, which is the all-new white-dialed regular Speedmaster. Challenging to get, I would say, for maybe the first couple of months, because there's going to be a lot of pent-up demand for this, but it's going in as part of the core range steel case. Same movement, pretty much exactly the same as your twin sapphire black-dialed regular Speedmaster, but with a white dial and that little red Speedmaster on the dial as well.
The funny thing is, Dave, there's been a lot of people commenting on this and a lot of anticipation, and various folks on forums, groups and Instagram posts hoping for this to come out. And it reminds me of the BS that people used to throw at Rolex, saying, oh, they changed the colour of the dial, oh, they changed the bezel, isn't that? People are doing it with Omega now.
White-dialed Speedmasters have always had a bit of a cult following because they don't do very many, and they're either typically in something like the Snoopy or some of the Japanese editions. There's not really that many white-dialed ones out there, and there's certainly not any regular stock white-dialed ones out there. So this is something that I think people have been clamouring for. Yes, at the end of the day, it's a Commoner Garden regular Speedmaster, albeit the latest iteration of it, with a white dial. Not anything really to write home about, but it's a very different aesthetic, and from having personally seen them in the Omega factory, I can say it is a great looking watch. It has just a different vibe and feel to the regular black dialed one. Looks a bit brighter, a bit punchier. I weirdly think it looks a little bit more premium. I don't think it really is. In fact, it's not, because it's your Commoner Garden Speedmaster, but it just looks that little bit more special.
Is it a bit like having a white-dialed stainless steel Daytona versus the black-dialed? They're both the same price, they're both hard to come by, but people gravitate towards the cleaner aesthetic of the white dial.
Yeah, I think that's probably what it is. I think it's also because I guess all of the really sought after Speedmasters in the last, good few years have generally, not always, but generally involved a white dial of some description, whether it's been your Alaska or your Snoopies, for example. So I think, will it wear off over time when folk maybe migrate back towards that classic black dialed one? Maybe. But I think this white one could get pretty popular, I'll be honest. The pricing is going to be in line with the regular black dialed model as well, so no upcharging for the sake of a white dial, which is a great thing.
And when we had William from Messina Labs on in a prior show that was out maybe just a few days ago when you're listening or viewing this one, and that is a good episode, go back and have a listen to it because it's awesome. And if you're watching this on YouTube, this is a good point to say. You're probably missing half the story. We do 2 episodes a week, but generally we only get the time to have one of them edited into video format. Sometimes we catch up maybe a month or two later, but if you want the latest and the greatest as it happens, check us out on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, those kind of places. But when we had William on and he was talking about things, he had hinted there were some murmurings about Swatch Group going back private, that the Hayeks were going to try and buy up the shares in the open market, perhaps offload Breguet, perhaps offload Blancpain, and do some kind of moving and shaking in that respect. Have you got any information on that? What have you heard? Because you weren't on the interview show, so I wanted to get your thoughts on this one.
Nothing specific, but there have been some quite fractious boardroom meetings over the last couple of months, one being quite well reported in some financial readings that happened in January, where, let's just say, the investors are more interested in the value of their shares and their return and or dividend, and possibly other people are more interested in the brands and the business itself. And there seems to be a growing divide between that set of investors who are important to the Swatch Group. Don't get me wrong, the family own around 23 to 25% by all accounts of the shares, but have a significantly larger voting bloc of around 45% of the voting rights within the business. So they have a great deal of sway. That said, they do need the capital from these investors, and you have to walk a fine line between doing what you want and running it like a private business and having the access to that capital that they really do need to keep that business running as it does. Could they buy it up? I would guess they probably could. They are, I would suggest, wealthy enough to do that if they wanted to. But would they be willing to risk their personal monies in that full venture? I doubt it. And one thing that the Hayeks typically do not do is they don't like debt. And if they were to buy it up, they would need money. That money would have to come from a bank and or a other source of revenue that doesn't involve shares, or it kind of defeats the purpose in the first place. But you're then beholden to that lending institution, which is something that they typically don't like to do. They like to be a debt-free business.
If only they had the brainwave ahead of time to open a Willy Wonka experience, because that seems to have had the best press of anything I have seen in a good long while. I was thinking about this, I was chatting with some people about Glasgow and where it stakes its claim in the world global economic market. And I think the first thing I remember was back maybe 1990, 1992. It was European City of Culture, but then it was also Europe's murder capital, which I thought was amazing. And then maybe fast forward to the mid-2000s when some people tried to drive a vehicle into an airport, and John Smeato came out and booted them in the balls and said, "Come to Scotland and we'll set about you." That was another great Glasgow thing. And then suddenly we have got the best thing ever, the greatest ever fantasy for kids to come along and check out a Roald Dahl classic, and that was the Willy Wonka experience. This has taken over the world. I am getting messages from listeners and friends across the globe who say, you keep talking about Glasgow, is that where you are? Is that where you're from? What's the story here? So Dave, were you involved in this?
No, but I kind of wish I was, because it's got some pretty primo primetime news slots, it has to be said. And I think while some people have maybe got some negative press, a few people have managed to leverage it into a degree of positive press for themselves that they would definitely not have had if this had gone to plan. What was this? This was an event that was held in a industrial area of Glasgow. a disused, from all accounts, warehouse that was converted into what was promised to be an all-singing, all-dancing Willy Wonka affair. 35 of your British pounds per ticket. Bring your kids along and they will be marvelled by all the fun that is Willy Wonka. Actually, what turned out to be was pretty much a freezing cold, mostly empty warehouse with some really dodgy looking, hashed together kind of displays. Very little in the way of fun. They were all promised jelly beans, apparently going by one of the actors that was there. 3 jelly beans per child and half a cup of lemonade. I mean, that's cinema level of buying your kind of candies. You expect to only be charged that kind of level of money if you go to a cinema and get that poorer return. All of these young actors that had been pulled in at £500 for the day, I believe, to do this show, turned out they didn't get paid, but they probably got more than their money's worth in national primetime television coverage.
I've just loved the memes that have come out. There have been absolutely first class visual content. We'll put a couple in the video, a couple in the show notes, and probably my favourite one was in the UK, just like in the States, we've got The Apprentice. You guys had Trump. I don't know who does it just now, don't even know if it still runs just now. Here in the UK, we have got Lord Sugar, Alan Sugar of Amstrad fame. And somebody made a meme because, as you know, if you watch The Apprentice, every week there is a challenge set. And somebody created this amazing picture, and the text underneath says, with Sir Alan above it or Lord Sugar above it, "This week, contestants, I want you to go to Glasgow and create an interactive experience." And I just thought, brilliant.
To be honest, that would probably have won the challenge if that had been on that show, because it was probably good enough to actually win. Because when you watch that show, the caliber of content that sometimes is made is poor, which led to maybe more than a little bit of disappointment when they actually saw an empty warehouse with some coloured in traffic cones. But hey, you know, the world's now being led by AI, so watch where that AI can lead you, because it will lead to the path of destruction.
The path of destruction carried on. You mentioned traffic cones, and that's poignant because for the last 5 years, I have been waiting, biding my time to go back to Geneva, not for a watch show, not for a watch event, but to check out the world famous Geneva Motor Show. Because I went for my first time, which is really strange, back in 2019, the year before the pandemic, and I went across with my nephew and one of my friends, and we had a blast. I always tell people how easy it is to get to Switzerland, especially Geneva, and if there's an event on at Pal Expo, it is literally joined onto the airport. It's about 4 minutes, and you cannot go wrong. It's super easy. And what I would do with SIHH in the past and the Geneva Motor Show is I would travel across early in the morning, get there, get through security, no bags to check in or check out, no luggage to collect, walk straight up to the show, scan my ticket, go in, have a blast, come back, pay extortionate prices in the airport for food, and then travel back to Scotland, pick my car up in the airport car park, and go home. Done in a day. Now, that was the plan because it worked flawlessly back in 2019, and I thought, as has happened in the watch industry, as soon as the pandemic started to calm down, and there was some murmurings recently that the global affairs committees of this, that and the other have said, yeah, the pandemic is over, it's now like the flu, deal with it that way. I thought, just like the watch companies, they would all jump at the chance of coming back for a show, because the London Watch Show was tremendous from a footfall point of view because it was the first thing after the pandemic. The first Watches and Wonders was amazing. Dubai Watch Week was amazing. And I expected the Geneva Motor Show to be even better than before. But a bit like the Willy Wonka experience, I turned up, took Simona with me to her first car event, and we walked in and we watched all these people kind of flowing up. They all came along, we all queued, we got in, we scanned our codes. We had to empty all the food and beverages out of our bags, but you know, this happens. And then we got inside and we looked around and it was a bit strange. There was like a hodgepodge of different car brands there. There was some classic stuff, some futuristic stuff, rest of mod stuff. And we had to look around and I said, right, okay, we'll go to the next hall and we'll check out what's there. And we were kind of doing the French mime thing, trying to find the door to the next hall. So I walked up to one of the security guys and said, how do we get to the second hall? And he said, what second hall? Uh-oh. At the last event, there were 5 halls. At this one, there was 1 hall. And the price was more expensive. And they didn't have the brand you would expect. They didn't have Ferrari, Lamborghini, Bentley, Tesla, Jaguar, nothing like that. They had Dacia, Renault, BYD and MG. and lots of video game simulators and lots of space everywhere. And I thought maybe I was expecting too much. So I checked on my little lunch break to see what other people were saying on the interwebs, and the Facebook comments, the YouTube comments in their official channel basically went crazy. I had wasted my time, and not really, because I'll get to that in a second. I'd wasted my time, Zamona's time, a day off work, flights, taxis, tickets to get in, all the rest of it, car parking charges at the airport for this amazing show. People had booked a week off work and travelled across the globe for this, and they were going mental in the comments. So that was a bit of a disappointment, and it just made me think, if the Willy Wonka guys been doing their international travels, but it was a double-edged sword, and I'll explain why, and this is where we move into the wrist check for today. Dave likes to come second, and he definitely will this time. Back a year ago, me and Dave went to Watches and Wonders, and we had a massive presentation about the Elise Nordan Freak. We had the guy there that invented it. We had all the iterations getting handed around. We had a look at them. The actual display stand was amazingly well put together. And I thought, cool. Then we had a meeting with them at Geneva Watch Days where they introduced their marquetry, silicium kind of dial. It's a blue, lovely looking thing. And I said on the show, I don't understand how this works because all the components look like they've just been placed, but they actually function. And that was fantastic. I was at their boutique down by the river. And then we went to Dubai Watch Week, and again they had a presentation. They had this camo effect Freak that was available as of then. We got to speak to the folks there. I spent a bit of time with their managing director, and I was working on some ideas in the background, and I was starting to get a bit of a feel for what I wanted to do. So the double-edged sword was, when I went across to Geneva for the motor show, I also went down to their boutique and picked up my new watch. So to put everybody out of their audio misery, if you're listening along at home, I have got myself probably the last watch I will purchase for a number of years, and the reason for that is obviously the house move. I've already sold a couple of watches. I have consolidated my collection down a fraction, still quite a few more to go, but this one came up and I thought, I've been looking at it, I've been thinking about it for a while, even way back to 3 years ago when we first got sent our first Ulysse Nardin to play with, and I thought, this company knows what they're doing. So the watch that I have got is Ulysse Nardin's Freak X, and this is the Magma edition. It is very similar to my Ducati Tudor Black Shield Fast Rider. Black with red lume that doesn't really lume up much, but unlike other watches, this one has almost got a tourbillon look to it. People have said it is a 60-minute tourbillon because it has got the escapement, the balance wheel at the end of the minute hand. Well, you couldn't really call it a hand. It is a strange skeletal arrangement, but it comes with a carbonium case which is infused with magma red coloration, plus it looks almost like Damascus steel, but it's super lightweight. Inside is a titanium tub, and obviously the movement technology is all titanium and silicon as well. This has got 72 hours of power reserve. It has got a bidirectional winding mechanism, and unlike the Freak 1 and the original, it has got a normal crown at the 3 o'clock position, so you can set it and wind it as you normally would. That means that the actual watch head is a lot slimmer, a lot thinner. It's down at 43mm, but don't let that fool you because, as I say, it's carbon, it's titanium, it is super lightweight on the wrist, and I absolutely love this. So I have now got a decent blue watch, I've now got a decent red watch, and the rest of them, they're all going to be going to new owners. But let me just quickly pop this one off the wrist. So in the past, if you've known about the Freak, you will know that you actually did all the alterations through the front bezel and the back of the watch. This one is far more normal, it's far more rugged and hard wearing. I've obviously had a look at some of the videos from Tim Mosso at the Watchbox to find out his thoughts on it and to learn even more than I was explained when I went down to the boutique and spoke to the experts there. I absolutely love this thing. You know that black and red is my colour scheme. The Mad One Red is one of my favourite watches. It ain't going nowhere. And obviously blue is another one of my colours. And if you can see there, that balance wheel is made of a blue silicon material, very similar to my Raj Tourbillon 1, quite similar to the Zenith Inventor, or the Defy Lab as it was called, that I never got because it was never fully released. And yeah, Gerard Perigo have got some cool, funky technology of a similar ilk. And Dave was talking about Ulysse Nardin recently. I was talking about the Lys Nardin that Simona was mentioning on the show, and everything has come together, and I have finally got my new watch. So that's me done my bit. Dave, time for you to do your bit.
So Dave is wearing his Glasuta Original 60s today. Off the wrist at the moment, but here we have it in front of us. For anyone listening in, this is the 60s with the orange, again, it's a bit of a theme here, Ricky, orange magma style crackle dial going on in here. Very Fume effect from pretty bright orange in the centre to definitely a kind of burnt orangey ochre on the edges, right into potentially almost a burgundy red at the very edge. I don't wear this watch very often, but I have to say I do love it every time I do. The dial is just something that you would typically not expect maybe from a German brand or from one of the bigger brands, maybe from someone like Anordane or someone like that. You might expect a dial like this. No, it is not enamel. It's a stamped dial, but with such a cool texture and coloration pattern. They've also done a green variation of this, I think the year before this one was released. The green just doesn't quite do it for me in the same way as this orangey red does. I think it's just much more impactful, the Fume being stronger. Obviously, with it being Glasuta Original, you have their in-house movement. Again, an underrated brand in my opinion. This is a brand that maybe doesn't get the headlines like it should. Some really cool watches in there, whether the 60s or the 70s. Lots of very Teutonic styled kind of musings, in many ways a bit like an A-Lang Azona, but at a more affordable price point. Nice and thin in there as well, very wearable, and with the little matched buckle on there as well. Generally, I'm a person who wears things on deployant class, but this is one of the few watches I would argue just kind of works in a pin buckle, probably at the dressier end of the spectrum for what I would wear. So that is what I am wearing for this wrist check. And another brand that are going to be at the show come this Saturday, a mere few days after you're listening to this, is Jussi and his brand Isotope. A brand that, have done a few watches that absolutely appeal to my aesthetic, and some of them definitely to Ricky's as well. And he has brought out a derivation of a watch that was so popular it sold out, and I believe that not a week has gone past without at least a few people messaging him saying, I really want one of these, they're sold out, are you ever going to do anything like it again? And what watch is this? This is the Hydrium X Will Return, a watch that he released based upon a famous New York sign that can be found hanging in many bodegas and stores in New York.
Bollocks, Dave, because I've seen this in Largs. It's round the corner from Nardini's, and I took a photo of this when I saw it and thought, this is international, this isn't just American.
Well, I think it's definitely international, but I believe his muse came from seeing these many, many years ago, back when he was in New York, before he was ever anything to do with watches. I believe in his old work that he was in with advertising and television. Anyway, regardless of the history, that was his history with it. And he brought out a watch very much based on the colour palette of this, with hands that match the clock, with a blue bezel and a kind of vibrant red handset on there. The handset also having a kind of outline in lume going on there, based on that Hydrium X, which is possibly one of the best case shapes, and I guess to a certain extent most innovative case shapes. It's still a watch, but it's a little bit different from everything else. It simultaneously manages to be really chunky and heavy, but wears very well on the wrist, which is a bit of a trick, it has to be said. Many watches out there are big and wear badly. Many are small and don't wear very nicely. This one is big, heavy, and wears well. So excellent watch as far as I'm concerned, that. But what's he done? He's brought out a updated version, but as the original was limited to 100 and he wanted to be true to that, this one now has a red bezel, not a blue bezel. It also has a brighter red full handset, but without the lume outlining going on in there as well. And this one is not limited by a number, but goes on sale 2 days before you're listening to that and runs through till March the 6th. So if you're still listening to this, you will just have enough time, if you wish, to get in on the action. He will honour and build as many watches as are ordered within that time frame and that order frame. Check out the show notes if you want to have a look at the watch. I'm sure there'll be a little link in there as well. But the most exciting bit, as far as I'm concerned, is he's brought out a wall clock. The watch, it's £1,000. Same price pretty much as the original, but the wall clock, a mere 175 of your British pounds, including tax. What, may you ask, is cool about this? It has a quartz movement. So it's a wall clock. That's what you would expect. The whole dial is loomed on this with a proper luminous material as you would find on a watch dial. Now, from speaking to Shusey, it's not Swiss Superluminova, but it is a Japanese equivalent. As he said, if he was to use Swiss Superluminova in this wall clock, it would be a very expensive wall clock. But at 175, and from a few people who I have spoken to who have seen the prototype, it glows for around a day with some sun charge on it as well. So this will be glowing through the night. So if you want to get some sleep, probably best not put it in your bedroom. 35 centimetres across, so a nice size.
Dave, isn't it good when you say something is 35 and then you put centimetres and I don't have to correct you for a change?
Okay, we'll go with that. But yes, I mean, I assumed if I said 35mm, it would be a very, very small wall clock. Or alternatively, it might be far away. But no, 35 centimetres, nice size, bit of presence. It will definitely glow like a moon on your wall. And $175, as I've already mentioned, I think it's definitely within the price of most people in terms of acceptability. Again, with this limited edition, to the number sold within the order period. After that, there will be a other version of it that will be available on his website, albeit not signed and not numbered on the back. But if you like the look of this, which in my personal opinion, and I am not associated with the company in any way, it's just super cool. And big wall clocks like that are hard to come past. Not many brands actually sell them. They tend to give them away on the rare occasion that they have a little bit of stock. So this is a rare occasion. You can buy one for a reasonable price.
And it goes up against the big Maxi swatches and those Audemars Piguet clocks and those rip-off Rolex ones that I'm pretty sure do not come from Geneva. Now, I'm looking forward to seeing this and tons of other things because we're mere hours away from getting ready to depart to head down south and check things out. Me and Dave will be there. There are a ton of folks from the writers group going to be along. We've got Mark. He's travelled all the way from the States to come back to the homeland. And there are all the listeners. There are even prior guests to the show. Chloe's going to be there. We're going to catch up with Studio Underdog. Adrian will be there. The folks from Christopher Ward. I can't think of anybody in the UK who's actually said to me that they're not going. That's how successful this thing is ahead of actually taking place. And unlike the Geneva Motor Show, we know the brands that are going. We know there's going to be at least 45 of them. We know the limited edition releases that will be there. And the superstars of the industry, Roger Smith, Mike France, etc., etc. So it's going to be a fantastic day. And we're going to have so much content recorded that we'll actually put out versus the stuff from Dubai that's still sitting.
We definitely need to get onto that at some point, as there's some great content that we did record there. But I'm sure none of that is going to date too badly. So when it comes out, it will still be music to your ears. But as Ricky mentions, we will be getting some great content at this show. There's such a wide variety of pretty boisterous characters, whether that be Neil from Duckworth, who's always got a good tale to tell, or Rich Benz from Studio Underdog, or of course Nicholas from Fears. And how can we forget the bold Roger will be over from the Isle of Man, who is going to have that single piece unique that he's done for this show. I'll be intrigued to see who brings along some suitcases of cash to buy that on the day, but needless to say, I'm sure it will be sold.
Nobody will be bringing boatloads and suitcases of cash because remember, this is a watch show in London and we'll listen to the master that is Paul Thorpe, because he tells us it like it is. We're going to be quite careful. So if anyone is travelling, all jokes aside, do be careful if you're coming to the show, because as much as there's going to be amazing security at the venue, when you leave the venue, when you're out at night, etc., etc., be on your guard. We talk about London all the time, and we talk about other places across the world, so just be safe rather than sorry. And that is it. That is the end of our show. We have crammed as much as we possibly could in here. Check out the show notes, check out the Instagram at Scottish Watches, get in touch, drop us an email. There is a little collection building of different emails from people, including a lengthy one from a listener that has given his yearly update since he last got in touch about what he's been up to, what he's liked with the show, and his thoughts and feelings on things. And if you've got guest suggestions, get in touch as well. Messina Labs, William there, that was a suggestion from a prior guest. And we've got loads and loads of things happening for Watches and Wonders. We actually had a call as I was driving back to record this, me, Dave, and somebody else, about some of the content we're going to get across in Geneva in literally a month's time. So thanks for listening, thanks for watching, and we'll catch you guys again soon.